Welcome to Calm Mind English. Sometimes the hardest part is not the work itself. It is the quiet moment before the work begins. When your body stays still even though your mind already knows what should happen next. You may have the plan. You may know the first task of the day. You may even understand why it matters. But when it is time to begin, your hand reaches for the phone, your eyes move to another tab, or you suddenly remember something small that feels easier to do. This is not always laziness. Many people blame themselves too quickly because they believe starting should be simple. They think, if I know what to do, I should be able to do it. But the mind does not always move in a straight line. Knowing is one kind of energy. Starting is another. Imagine a quiet morning. The room is still. The light is soft through the window. A laptop sits on the table, or a notebook waits beside a cup of coffee. The task is not a mystery. Maybe it is studying English. Maybe it is applying for a job. Maybe it is cleaning one area of the house, exercising, sending a message, editing a video, or opening a document that has been waiting for days. You already know. That is what makes it feel more frustrating. You're not confused. You're not searching for the answer. You are standing very close to the action, but something inside you tightens right before the first step. So you pick up your phone for a moment. Just a moment. You check one message, one video, one notification. One small thing that does not ask much from you. The task stays there. At first, the delay feels harmless. It is only 5 minutes. Then 10 minutes pass. The morning begins to lose its shape. The task has not changed, but it feels heavier because now it carries time, guilt, and pressure with it. This is the strange thing about delay. The longer you stand outside the task, the larger the task appears. A simple email can begin to feel like a serious performance. A short study session can feel like a full life decision. A small workout can feel like a judgment about your discipline. The mind starts adding extra weight. It says if you start, you should do it properly. If you open the file, you should make real progress. If you sit down to study, you should focus deeply. If you begin, you should prove that you're serious. And then the first step no longer feels like a first step. It feels like a promise. It feels like a test. That is why many people avoid the beginning. They are not avoiding the action only. They are avoiding the feeling attached to the action. There is a quiet pressure in the space before starting. It can feel like a wall, even when the real task is small. You might think you need more motivation, more discipline, or a stronger mindset, but sometimes you need something much simpler. You need to make the beginning smaller. Before we talk about systems and routines, we need to understand this first. The goal is not to become a person who never feels resistance. That is not realistic. Even responsible people feel resistance. Even disciplined people have mornings when the first move feels strangely heavy. The difference is not that they feel nothing. The difference is that they learn how to begin without arguing with the feeling. You do not have to win a debate inside your mind before you move. You do not have to feel clear, confident, or ready. You only need to lower the size of the first contact. Because often, the mind becomes calmer after the body has already started. Think about opening a door. Before you open it, you may imagine everything behind it. The whole room, the mess, the work, the time it will take. But when your hand touches the handle, the moment changes. It becomes more real and less imagined. Starting works in a similar way. Before you begin, the task lives inside your thoughts. Inside your thoughts, it can grow without limit. It can become larger than it is. But once you touch it, open it, write one word, read one line, move one object, or stand in the place where the action happens. The task becomes smaller because it becomes physical. This is why the first move matters so much. Not because it finishes anything, not because it proves anything. It matters because it brings you out of the fog of thinking and into contact with reality. And reality is usually lighter than imagination. Maybe your task is to study. Before starting, your mind says, I have so much to learn. I am behind. I need to focus for a long time. But if the first move is only opening the book and reading one sentence, the body can do that. Maybe your task is to clean. Before starting, your mind sees the whole room, the whole house, every unfinished corner. But if the first move is picking up one shirt or clearing one cup from the table, the body can do that. Maybe your task is to work on a project. Before starting, your mind sees the final result, the quality, the mistakes, the judgment. But if the first move is opening the file and writing one rough line, the body can do that. The beginning becomes possible when it is no longer treated like the whole mountain. So today, we are not going to force a harsh kind of discipline. We are not going to attack the part of you that hesitates. We're going to understand it, reduce the pressure around it, and build a small way to move. Because your life does not always change through a huge decision. Sometimes it changes because you stop asking yourself to feel ready, and you simply move closer to the thing that matters. The work may still be there. The resistance may still be there. But you can learn to make the first step. So small that resistance does not need to control the whole day. And that is where starting becomes possible again. The hidden reason starting feels hard is that the mind often looks too far ahead. You sit in front of the laptop, and the real task may be simple. Open the document. Write the first sentence. Read one page. Send one message. Fold one piece of laundry. Walk outside for 5 minutes. But the mind does not stay with that first move. It jumps forward. It imagines the full process, the effort, the possible problems, and the feeling of being trapped in something difficult. So before your hand moves, your mind is already tired. This happens quietly. You may not hear a clear sentence in your head. You may only feel heaviness, a small resistance in the chest, a slow body, a sudden need to check something else. But underneath that feeling, the mind is calculating too much. It is not only asking, can I start? It is asking, can I finish this? Can I do it well? Will this take too long? What if I fail? What if I cannot focus? What if I waste my effort? Those questions make the beginning feel unsafe. A blank screen is a good example. The screen itself is simple. It is just a space. But when you stare at it, it can feel full of expectation. You think about the final version before you write the first imperfect line. You think about whether it will be good before anything exists. You compare the beginning with the finished product you want. And because the gap is large, your body does not want to enter it. The problem is not the blank screen. The problem is the meaning your mind attaches to it. The same thing happens with exercise. The first step might be putting on shoes. But the mind imagines a full workout, sweat, tired muscles, time, discomfort, and a feeling of not being as fit as you wish. So the shoes stay by the door. The same thing happens with studying. The first step might be opening one lesson. But the mind imagines everything you do not know yet. It remembers past difficulty. It sees the distance between your current level and the level you want. So the book stays closed. When a mind sees the whole distance at once, the first step becomes heavy. This is why telling yourself, just do it, often does not work. That sentence is too large. It does not show the body where to go. It does not reduce the fear of the first moment. It only adds pressure to a system that is already tense. Many people try to solve starting resistance with more planning. They make a better schedule. They choose a better app. They write a cleaner list. Planning can help, but sometimes planning becomes another place to hide. Because planning still lets you stay near the task without touching it. You feel productive because you are organizing the idea of action. But the body has not crossed into the action itself. The task remains untouched, and the first move remains emotionally charged. There is nothing wrong with planning. But when you already know what to do, another plan may not be the missing piece. The missing piece may be emotional permission to begin badly, briefly, and without certainty. This matters because the beginning is often messy. A first sentence may be weak. A first attempt may be slow. A first 5 minutes may feel awkward. A first movement may not create confidence right away. But many people wait for the beginning to feel clean. They want the mind to be ready. They want the mood to be right. They want the environment to be perfect. They want the first step to feel smooth and meaningful. This waiting creates more delay. In real life, many good actions begin in a very ordinary way. You sit down with low energy. You open the file without excitement. You read slowly. You write something simple. You move one object. You start before the feeling becomes beautiful. Then, after a few minutes, the mind begins to adjust. Not always, not perfectly, but often enough. The mistake is believing that the mind must give permission first. In many moments, the body can move before the mind feels fully ready. A person who struggles to start may think, I need to fix my mindset. But sometimes the mindset changes after the first physical contact. The hand touches the notebook. The chair moves closer to the desk. The laptop opens. The document appears. The body says, we are here now, and the mind slowly follows. This is why we need to separate starting from finishing. Finishing belongs to later. Quality belongs to later. Deep focus belongs to later. The first step has only one job. It brings you into contact. When you make the first step responsible for everything, it becomes too heavy. It has to create motivation, produce results, prove discipline, and remove doubt. No first step can carry all of that. So give the first step a smaller job. Its job is not to finish the task. Its job is to make the task real. If you need to write, the first step is not writing well. It may be opening the document and typing the title. If you need to study, the first step is not mastering the topic. It may be reading the first paragraph. If you need to clean, the first step is not creating a perfect room. It may be clearing one small surface. This kind of beginning may feel too small to respect. But small beginnings work because they do not threaten the nervous system as much. A huge command creates resistance. A small contact creates movement. The mind often resists identity pressure. When you say, I must become disciplined today, the task becomes personal. If you fail, it feels like you failed as a person. But when you say, I will touch the task for 5 minutes, the pressure becomes lighter. The action is clear. The time is limited. The body understands it. You're not asking yourself to become a different person in one morning. You're asking yourself to move closer. That difference is powerful because the part of you that avoids starting may not be trying to destroy your life. It may be trying to protect you from pressure, shame, uncertainty, and effort that feels too large. When you attack that part, it often becomes stronger. When you reduce the threat, it becomes easier to move. So when you cannot start, do not immediately ask, what is wrong with me? Ask a more useful question. What is making this first step feel too big? Maybe the task is unclear. Maybe the standard is too high. Maybe the time feels unlimited. Maybe the environment is full of distractions. Maybe you're thinking about the whole project instead of the first contact. Once you see the hidden weight, you can remove some of it. You do not need to solve the whole task before you begin. You only need to make the beginning small enough for today's energy. And once you begin, the task becomes less like a shadow and more like an object in your hands. That is when your power starts to return. There's also a biological reason you reach for the phone before the task. The phone gives the brain quick relief. A message, a short video, a small notification, a new image, a new sound. These things ask very little from you, but they give the brain a fast change in feeling. The task is different. The task may be meaningful, but it asks for effort before it gives a reward. It may help your future, but the future is not as emotionally loud as the screen in your hand. It may matter deeply, but in the first moment, it can feel uncertain. The brain often chooses the nearest relief. This does not mean you are weak. It means your brain is doing what brains often do. It moves toward what feels easy to enter and away from what feels uncertain, effortful, or emotionally heavy. The problem is that quick relief can quietly steal the doorway into action. You do not usually decide to waste the whole morning. It begins smaller than that. You only want a little comfort before starting. You want a softer feeling. You want to avoid the discomfort of the first minute. But the first minute is important. The first minute is where the brain learns what kind of day this is becoming. If the first discomfort always leads to escape, the brain learns that escape is the routine. If the first discomfort leads to a small contact with the task, the brain learns that discomfort is not dangerous. This is not about perfection. It is about training the doorway. Think about a person who sits down to work. The phone is beside the keyboard. The task is on the screen, but the phone is closer to the hand. The task asks for thinking. The phone asks for touching. In that moment, the easier action usually wins. This is why motivation is not only an inner feeling. It is also a design problem. What is closest to your hand matters. What is already open matters. What is visible matters. What takes fewer seconds matters. If the distraction is one touch away and the task requires 5 steps to enter, the brain will often choose the distraction before you even have time to argue. So one way to reduce starting resistance is to change the physical path. Put the phone farther away before you begin. Not because the phone is evil, but because distance creates a pause. Close the extra tabs. Place the notebook where your hand can reach it. Open the document before the work session. Leave the first tool visible. Small changes in the environment reduce the amount of willpower needed at the door. The brain loves easy entry, so make the right action easier to enter. Another reason the brain avoids starting is that beginning has no immediate guarantee. When you open the task, you do not know how well it will go. You do not know whether you will feel focused. You do not know whether the result will be good. The phone is more predictable. It gives something right away. It may not be meaningful, but it is reliable in the short term. This is why meaningful tasks can lose against meaningless distractions. The meaningful task has delayed reward. The distraction has immediate reward. To work with this, do not demand that your brain suddenly love delayed rewards. Build a small immediate reward into the beginning itself. The reward can be simple. A check mark after 5 minutes. A warm drink only when the document is open. A quiet timer that ends quickly. A small note that says, "I touched the task today." This may sound too basic, but basic systems often work because they speak the brain's language. The brain repeats what feels possible. If every work session begins with pressure, shame, and a huge goal, the brain starts to avoid the work area. The desk becomes a place of tension. The notebook becomes a symbol of failure. The laptop becomes a doorway into self-judgment. But if the first contact is small, timed, and survivable, the brain slowly stops treating the task like a threat. This is why 5 minutes can matter. 5 minutes is not magic because it finishes the work. It is powerful because it changes the emotional meaning of starting. It tells the brain, we can enter this and still be safe. We can touch the task and leave if needed. We are not trapped. When the brain does not feel trapped, it often gives you more energy. Many people think discipline means forcing yourself through resistance every time. But constant force is expensive. It drains you. It makes starting feel like a battle. A better system reduces the size of the battle. You do not need to fight the phone with pure willpower. If the phone is in another room, you do not need to fight the blank screen. If yesterday you left one unfinished sentence waiting for you, you do not need to fight the whole workout. If your only promise is to put on shoes and step outside, this is not lowering your standards. It is building a bridge to your standards. Because high standards without an entrance become pressure. A small entrance gives those standards a path. There's also a mood pattern here. When you feel stressed, tired, or uncertain, the brain wants emotional regulation before achievement. It wants to feel better now. That is why you may suddenly clean something unrelated, check the weather, organize files, or watch something short before beginning the real task. The mind says, I will start after I feel a little better. But sometimes the real task is the thing that would make you feel better after a few minutes. Avoiding it gives relief first, then guilt. Touching it gives discomfort first, then relief. The order is different. This is the quiet training of self-discipline. It is learning to accept a small amount of discomfort before relief, instead of always needing relief before discomfort. Not a huge amount, not a dramatic amount, just the first small moment. Open the page before checking the phone. Put on the shoes before deciding your mood. Read one line before judging your focus. Write one rough sentence before deciding whether you are capable today. This teaches the brain a new sequence. Action first, feeling later. Over time, the brain begins to trust the sequence. It learns that starting does not always mean suffering for hours. It learns that effort can begin gently. It learns that the first minute is allowed to be uncomfortable and still safe. That is how resistance becomes smaller, not because it disappears, but because it loses authority. When resistance says, do something easier first, you do not need to argue with it. You can simply make one small contact with the task. You can give the brain evidence that starting is not as dangerous as it imagines. And evidence is stronger than self-criticism. Self-criticism says, I should be better. Evidence says, I open the file. I read the line. I move the object. I stayed for 5 minutes. I began. The brain can learn from evidence. So the next time your hand moves toward the phone before the task, pause for one small second. Do not create a speech inside your mind. Do not shame yourself. Just notice the doorway. Then make the task easier to touch than the distraction. Move the phone away. Bring the tool closer. Set the timer low. Open the first page. Begin with contact. That is how you start working with your brain instead of only fighting it. Now we need to change the meaning of starting. Most people think starting means entering the whole task. Once they begin, they feel responsible for everything. The result, the time, the quality, the finish, and the proof that they are disciplined. That makes starting too heavy. So instead of treating starting as a commitment to finish, treat it as contact. Contact is simple. It means you move close enough to touch the task without asking yourself to complete it. You open the book. You sit at the desk. You place your hands on the keyboard. You write the date. You read the first sentence. You put one dish in the sink. Contact is not impressive from the outside, but inside the mind, it changes the state of the task. Before contact, the task is an idea. After contact, the task is real. This matters because ideas can become heavy in the mind. They can grow, repeat, and create pressure. But a real object is easier to deal with. A page can be opened. A sentence can be changed. A cup can be moved. A file can be named. Contact brings the task down from the air and places it in front of you. Imagine someone who needs to study for an exam. They have been thinking about it all morning. The thought keeps returning, but the book remains closed. The more they think, the more tired they feel. If they tell themselves, I need to study for 2 hours, the body may resist. 2 hours feels too large. It sounds like a demand. But if they say, I will sit down and open the lesson for 5 minutes, the body has a clear and lighter instruction. 5 minutes of contact. During those 5 minutes, they do not need to master the topic. They do not need to feel motivated. They do not need to solve the entire problem. They only need to stay near the task. This is how you lower the emotional wall. You are not trying to trick yourself. You're giving your nervous system a smaller doorway. The same method works for many parts of life. If cleaning feels too large, contact may be standing in the room with a trash bag. If exercise feels too large, contact may be putting on shoes. If writing feels too large, contact may be opening the document and writing one rough sentence. The roughness is important. Many people cannot start because they want the first movement to be clean. They want the first sentence to be good. They want the first workout to feel strong. They want the first study session to be focused. But the first contact is allowed to be low quality, is allowed to be awkward, is allowed to be slow, is allowed to feel strange, is allowed to be only a beginning. A door does not need to be beautiful to open. This is a practical mindset. When you lower the standard for the first step, you do not lower the standard for the whole work. You simply separate entry from performance. Entry comes first. Performance comes later. When people mix these two, they freeze. They try to perform before they enter. They try to create a good result before the task has even begun. That is too much pressure for the first minute. So give the first minute a very small job. The first minute only brings you closer. You can use a simple question. What is the smallest physical sign that I have started? Not the smallest thought, not the smallest intention. A physical sign. Maybe the laptop is open. Maybe the document title is written. Maybe the pen is uncapped. Maybe the shoes are on. Maybe the first item is placed in the basket. Maybe the timer is running. The body needs signals. When there is a physical sign, the mind has something to follow. It no longer floats in the vague space of I should start. It can see that starting has already begun. This is why rituals can help. A ritual is not something dramatic. It is a repeated doorway. You sit in the same place. You put the phone away. You open the same notebook. You set the same 5-minute timer. You begin with the same small line. The ritual tells the brain, this is the path. After enough repetition, the beginning becomes less emotional. You do not have to decide everything again. You just follow the doorway you have built. A 5-minute contact method can be very simple. First, choose the task. Not 10 tasks. One task. Second, define the contact. Make it physical and clear. Third, set a timer for 5 minutes. Fourth, stay with the task until the timer ends. When the timer ends, you have two choices. You can stop without guilt because you completed the contact, or you can continue because the task now feels less heavy. Both choices are useful. If you stop, you still train the beginning. If you continue, you use the beginning to create momentum. This removes the trapped feeling. Many people avoid starting because they believe starting means they are locked into a long effort. When the mind feels trapped, it escapes before anything begins. A 5-minute contact gives the mind an exit. Strangely, when the mind knows it has an exit, it often does not need it as much. You may find that after 5 minutes, the task feels more normal. The document is open now. The first sentence exists. The room is not as overwhelming. The body is already moving. The beginning was the hardest part, and now it is behind you. This does not happen every time. Some days, 5 minutes will remain 5 minutes. That is still not failure. It is a completed repetition of starting. You kept the doorway alive. Consistency is built from these small repetitions. If you only count large sessions, you may feel like you're failing often. But if you count honest contact, you can see that you are training the skill of beginning. That skill matters because every meaningful task requires a doorway. You may not control your energy every day. You may not control your mood every morning. You may not control how heavy the task feels at first, but you can control the size of the entrance. Make it smaller. Make it physical. Make it timed. Make it repeatable. This is how starting changes from a battle into a practice. You do not need to command yourself with pressure. You can guide yourself with design. Move closer. Touch the task. Stay for 5 minutes. Let the first contact do its quiet work. Starting does not always begin in the mind. Sometimes it begins in the hand, the feet, the chair, the page, the tool, the small movement that happens before you feel ready. This is important because many people wait for motivation as if it is the signal to begin. They wait for a feeling of energy, clarity, confidence, or interest. When the feeling does not arrive, they think the day is already lost. But motivation is not always a starting point. Sometimes it is a result. You move first, and then the mind begins to wake up. Think about a cold car in the morning. It does not instantly feel smooth. It starts slowly. The engine needs a moment. The sound is rough at first, but after it runs, the system warms. The human mind can be similar. The first minute may feel awkward. The first sentence may feel flat. The first stretch may feel stiff. The first page may feel slow. That does not mean the action is wrong. It may only mean the system is warming. But if you stop every time the first minute feels uncomfortable, you never reach the warming stage. This is why movement before motivation is so useful. The body can begin with simple instructions even when the mind is unclear. Stand up, sit down, open a file, put the phone away, walk to the sink, touch the book, start the timer. These movements do not need emotional agreement. They only need execution. When you make the first movement physical, you reduce the need for inner debate. Inner debate can be exhausting. It sounds like, should I start now or later? Do I have enough energy? What if I cannot focus? Maybe I should prepare more. Maybe I should wait until I feel better. The debate can feel serious, but often it is just another form of delay. A physical first move interrupts the debate without needing to answer every question. You do not have to decide your entire mood. You only have to move the chair. You do not have to decide your whole identity. You only have to open the page. You do not have to know whether the session will be perfect. You only have to begin a timer. Action gives the mind new information. Before action, the mind only has imagination. After action, it has evidence. It can feel the desk. It can see the document. It can notice that the task is not as huge as it seemed from far away. This is why a small movement can create clarity. Clarity often appears after contact, not before. A person may say, I do not know where to start. But after opening the file and reading the first paragraph, the next step becomes visible. Another person may say, I do not feel like cleaning. But after picking up one item, they see the next item. Another person may say, I cannot exercise today. But after walking outside, the body accepts a few more minutes. The path appears through movement. This is different from forcing yourself to work for hours. Movement before motivation is not about ignoring your limits. It is about giving yourself a small entry before deciding what is possible. After 5 minutes, you can decide again. That is a fair agreement with yourself. The problem with waiting is that the mind often waits for a feeling that only action can create. You wait to feel focused, but focus may come from placing attention on something real. You wait to feel confident, but confidence may come from seeing yourself begin. You wait to feel less overwhelmed, but overwhelm may shrink when the task becomes physical. So the order changes. Instead of feeling, then action, then result, try action, then feeling, then result. At first, this may feel uncomfortable because the mind wants certainty before movement. It wants a guarantee that the effort will be worth it. It wants to know that starting will lead somewhere. But real life rarely gives that guarantee in advance. You create the next piece of certainty by moving. A small action is like turning on a light in a dark room. It may not show the whole room, but it shows the next few steps. That is enough. You do not need the whole path before the first movement. You need enough light to touch the next thing. This is also why the first action should be almost too simple. If it requires a lot of thinking, it may restart the debate. If it requires emotional strength, it may create pressure. If it requires a perfect mood, it will fail on normal days. A good first action is plain. Open the file. Write the date. Read one line. Fill one glass of water. Put the shoes by the door. Place the notebook on the table. Close the extra tab. Start the timer. Plain actions are powerful because they are easy to repeat. Your future self benefits from repeated plain actions more than rare intense effort. A dramatic start can feel good once in a while, but a small start can save many ordinary days. And ordinary days are where most of life happens. You may not always have a perfect morning. You may wake up tired. The room may be messy. Your mind may feel slow. The task may still feel unpleasant. But if your system only requires a tiny first movement, you still have a way in. This gives you stability. You are no longer depending completely on mood. You are depending on a doorway you can use in many moods. That is real discipline in daily life. It is not loud. It is not harsh. It does not need to look impressive. It is the quiet ability to start small when the mind is still catching up. And there is something kind about this. You stop demanding that your mind become perfect before you act. You allow yourself to begin as a normal person with hesitation, low energy, and imperfect focus. You let movement carry part of the weight. The body can help the mind. When the mind is stuck, let the body make one small, honest move. Do not ask, am I ready for the whole task? Ask, what movement would bring me 1 inch closer? Then do that. The next morning, the same desk may be waiting. The same task may still exist. The phone may still be nearby. The mind may still try to make the work feel larger than it is. So the goal is not to create a perfect personality. The goal is to create a starting system that works even when your mood is not perfect. A realistic system begins the night before or at the end of the last session. Before you leave the task, prepare the next doorway. Do not leave your future self with a vague command like study tomorrow or work on the project. That is too broad. It gives the morning mind too many decisions. Leave a clear first action. Write one sentence at the top of the page. Read page 12. Open the document and leave the cursor where the next line should begin. Put the book on the table. Place your workout clothes where you can see them. Write the first 3 words of the email and leave it as a draft. This is called reducing friction. Friction is anything that makes starting require more effort than necessary. Searching for the file is friction. Finding the book is friction. Deciding which task matters is friction. Cleaning the desk before opening the work is friction. Having the phone beside you is friction. Some friction is small, but small friction can stop a tired mind. So remove what you can before the moment arrives. If you want to study in the morning, do not make the morning version of you search for materials. If you want to exercise, do not make the tired version of you find clothes. Choose a routine and decide the time. If you want to write, do not make the blank page the first thing you face. Prepare the entrance. This is not about controlling every detail. It is about making the first step obvious. The best first step should be so clear that you could do it even with low motivation. For example, instead of saying, tomorrow I will be productive, say, after breakfast, I will sit at the desk, open the document, and work for 5 minutes. Instead of saying, I need to clean the house, say, I will clear the kitchen table for 5 minutes. Instead of saying, I should learn English, say, I will listen to one short lesson and write 3 sentences. The task becomes easier when the first move has a shape. You can also use a simple rule. Start before input. Input means the things that enter your mind from outside. Videos, messages, news, social media, emails, comments, and notifications. These things are not always bad, but they can fill the mind before your own intention has a chance to stand up. When you check the phone first, The day begins with other people's noise. So try to give your own task a small first contact before the outside world enters. It does not need to be long. 5 minutes is enough. Open the page before the feed. Read one paragraph before the messages. Move one object before the screen. Write one rough line before checking what everyone else is doing. This protects the doorway of the day. Another part of the system is choosing the right size. Many people fail because they choose a first step that sounds responsible, but is still too large. They say, I will work for 1 hour. I will finish the whole section. I will clean everything. I will change my life this week. These goals may come from a sincere place, but they can scare the nervous system. A better first step may feel almost embarrassingly small. That is a sign it can work. When a step is small enough, you have fewer excuses. You may not feel ready for 1 hour, but you can open the file. You may not feel ready to clean the whole room, but you can pick up 5 things. You may not feel ready to become disciplined, but you can start the timer. Small does not mean meaningless. Small means accessible. And accessible actions repeated over time become identity. You begin to see yourself differently, not because you gave yourself a speech, but because you have evidence. I am someone who can touch the task. I am someone who can begin before I feel perfect. I am someone who can return after delay. This kind of identity is quiet. It grows through proof. There will still be days when you avoid the task. That does not destroy the system. The next step is not punishment. The next step is return. Return is one of the most important skills in self-discipline. Many people lose a whole day because they lost the first hour. They think, I already failed, so I will start tomorrow. But a realistic system allows you to restart in the middle of the day. You can say, the morning did not go well, but I can make contact now. 5 minutes now is better than a perfect plan tomorrow that never begins. This is how you stop making delay bigger than it needs to be. Delay is information, not a final sentence. It tells you the entrance was too heavy, the phone was too close, the task was too vague, or the pressure was too high. Use that information. Adjust the doorway. Start again smaller. A good starting system has 3 parts. The first part is a clear trigger. After breakfast, after brushing your teeth, after the kids leave, after lunch, after opening the laptop, choose a moment that already exists in your day. The second part is a physical first action. Open the file. Put on shoes. Read one line. Clear one surface. Write the date. The third part is a short time limit. 5 minutes. Maybe 10 if 5 feels too easy. The time limit keeps the mind from feeling trapped. Trigger, physical action, short time. That is enough to begin. The final piece is to stop judging the first 5 minutes by how impressive they look. Some 5-minute starts will turn into real progress. Some will not. Some will feel focused. Some will feel messy. But all of them keep the doorway open. And when the doorway stays open, your life has more chances to move. You do not need to solve your whole discipline problem today. You do not need to become a completely different person by tomorrow morning. You only need to make the next beginning smaller, clearer, and closer. Place the book on the table. Open a file. Move the phone away. Set the timer. Touch the task for 5 minutes. A small beginning is not the opposite of a serious life. It is often how a serious life becomes possible. One quiet action, one clear doorway, one honest return. That is enough for today.